allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have roll recorded, all of us. You have everybody?
Let's see everybody from the public that make it.
We're gonna. Dominic, can you do me a favor? Mike forgot we had a board meeting today. Can you yell down the hall for me?
I thought there was something wrong with this. It's your mic.
Yeah, that's what he's not here yet. Yeah, but he's back. We're going to hear finance. Ken Phillips is going to go first. He's in the car, yes. This is in Jersey. Did you tell Ken we were starting, or? Ken, that should knock some points off of our payment. Your tardiness. We're gonna
I was talking to the boss. Where's the boss? There's the boss.
Actually, you're up.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. My name's Ken Phillips again. For those, it's a pleasure to be here. We're here to talk tonight about several things. One, Mr. Foyne and his partner are going to have appropriate legal documents at your meeting in 2 weeks if you want to go through with this. But if you recall, in 2015, we passed a resolution with respect to the 2008 bonds, and we completed a refunding on that issue and saved a lot of money. And we're at the point now that we're probably going to hopefully maybe take another bite of that apple at the beginning of 17. And then we also have, which is the presentation that you have, I think, before you today. When you look at that presentation, we always like to start off, if you can bring it up there, Mike, or I guess we're going to have hard copy. We have the gross debt service outstanding, and that's all the debt, all the series of bonds, okay, that have occurred, and you can see bonds from 02 after 16. A lot of them have been refunding, so I'll let you read the footnotes at your pleasure, but the rates are very, very attractive. And so some of the ones that are still a little higher, we can go ahead and maybe have some savings. The page after this is the net debt service outstanding, and that's net after reimbursement. The state will give you reimbursement when they this year you'll be getting 15-16 payment, and then also 16-17. They did not pay you last year the reimbursement, but they are going to be paying you the reimbursement. The interesting thing, and we're going to make reference to this in the last part of the presentation here today, is on the far right-hand column. You're in that $12.5 million range on a net basis, and you can see that the debt really drops off then beginning in 26, and then totally goes away in 29. And, you know, I've been affiliated with Easton for 25 plus years. And the district has never borrowed money on a frivolous basis, borrowed money when you needed to borrow money, okay? You've done projects when you needed to do projects. And I have to commend previous boards and this board as well, is your debt service is very short. You know, when you consider that you're a district of the size that you are, and you're virtually out of debt here beginning in 29, roughly 10 years out there, that's pretty impressive. There aren't a lot of districts of your size who can really say that. So that's something you should be proud of and proud of previous boards and administrations as well. And why that's important, I want to focus on that, is because we're going to talk about potentially some other borrowings that are under consideration down the road with you. And Mr. Simonetta is going to give a little intro when we get to that point. And then we're going to talk about how things are a little different under Act 1 in terms of funding. And you heard me mention that last time I was here, you know, as we started to look at projects. The next page is, besides the 2008 bonds that are currently have a resolution already in place, we have the 2011. It's on page 3. and then the 2012 on page 4. So what's going to happen in 2 weeks is we're going to put in place the appropriate legal documents so that we can then refund, rates willing, refund the 2011 and the 2012 bonds. Okay? And the first one hopefully will happen the beginning of January. We're working on that now. And then to the extent we get the opportunity, we'll also then focus on the 12s and also a piece of the 2008s if it makes sense. These are the 11s and 12s are what we sort of call housekeeping items. Okay? You can see the savings, while not the $1 million plus that we've enjoyed on previous, and you've saved, $7 million plus here, in the last couple of years. When you take a look at the 11s and 12s, it's really a fiscal housekeeping thing. So we legally cannot take them away out of the market until April 1 of 17. So we haven't been able to do these before. Okay? Now, once we're getting close to April 1, 17, once you're within 90 days, you can go ahead and do that. So we should be able to hopefully save, roughly $200,000 on the 11s, and when you flip the page, another $250,000 or so on the 12s, depending on where rates are. So again, a fiscal housekeeping thing, but it's something that Mr. Reed and Mr. Freund will prepare the legal documents for. Kevin will be here to go through those documents with you in 2 weeks, and we'll basically put them in place at the state and be able to take advantage of that. To the extent we get the 08 another piece done, we can do that as well.
Ken, you say you can't go until January, and you say assuming rates.
Yeah.
Where they're at. With your projections and things, your office, where are we? I mean, are you confident rates are going to be where?
I think for the first piece, for the first piece done in 11, yes. I mean, we're basically in negotiations now on several different fronts on that.
Okay.
So I'm pretty confident on that. Rates are heading higher. The Fed, just last month rates have increased over 0.3%. But we've enjoyed, and you've enjoyed, really low rates. And I do think rates are going to stay relatively low historically, but they're going to be higher than what we've enjoyed in the last couple of years. Okay? So I do think we'll be able to get the first one done, and then we'll see where we are standing with the second one. But just like the 08 resolution that's been in place now for about a year plus, we'll have this resolution in place that we can act very quickly to the extent that we can. Okay? Mike, I'll turn it over to you with respect to before we get into the last page.
Okay, just a little precursor to this last page in future capital projects. We started working as a committee talking about future projects with respect to other buildings, like we're doing with PACS, or with Palmer and Cheston being kind of the top 2 priorities of buildings that need our next attention. So we started the conversations and we talked about doing a building at a time or both buildings, and then we talked to Ken about, given our financial picture, what's the best way to attack it. Do we borrow $20 million? If we see what we want to do we borrow $20 million? Do we go out and borrow $50 million now, given our debt is going to decrease over the next 4 or 5 years? So I asked Ken to do a projection of borrowing another $50 million. That's what that last means. Since that time, and I'll let Ken explain that and talk about our advantages or disadvantages of borrowing now or waiting. But since that time, the committee has kind of redirected or looked at possibly attacking it a different way. Whether we do some of our important projects with the building. I mean, we're going to be at least 2 years out before we talk about renovating another building anyway. Do we wait? Do we borrow some for some of the big projects? We have roofing issues, we have field issues, we have a number of issues that would be part of a building project. So what we said at the last meeting, which was last Wednesday in the committee, was we're going to try to give some direction to Ken with some options, and then he can provide, moving forward, the best way to attack our debt or our borrowing options. So right now, it's just all in planning stages. We're just talking about it. But this page here is just looking at if we were to go out and borrow $50 million moving forward, assuming we're going to address those buildings on a wide basis, you know, all in type thing.
Perfect. This is nothing more than an illustration tonight. The most important thing we're going to walk away from here tonight is, if you had any thoughts of issuing new debt for projects, you're going to need to start to fund it now. I don't care if it's 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, or whatever that number turns out to be over the next 5, 10 years, whatever it is. You have to start to fund it now under Act 1. So the way that we read this very simple illustration, the very first column is that total net outstanding, what I spent a little time with on page 2. Okay? You can see that again. Your debt starts to fall off in 26 and is totally gone in 29. The next two columns, hypothetical, getting 25 million in 18, getting 25 million in 20. No magic to those dates at all. We're going to get money when you need money. But when you take a look at those two blue columns, you can see that we pretty much defer the principal out until your old principal goes away. That's called a wraparound. Under Act 1, I bet you 9 out of 10 financings for new money that I do is done this fashion. Why? Because you have in place, there's a column third from the right. You have in place 7.71 mils for debt service. It's in your budget. Quite honestly, that's never going to get out of your budget. Okay? Because you'll never be out of debt. I hate to say it that way, but you'll never be out of debt, because what you need to do 15 years from now is you need to refurbish something else. Okay? So, under Act 1, we have that as our base, 7.71. We're going to use that because to borrow 50 million, when you go down that third column from the right, you need to get to 8.84. Okay? Based on the assumptions of footnote 2 and 3. Let's just look at footnote 2 and 3. We assume getting first money in April of 18, average rate 279, which is current rates plus 0.5%. That's probably super aggressive, because I think rates are going to be higher, to be quite honest with you. And then the next footnote 3 then is basically a 20 issue, but again, using current rates plus 50. Who knows where rates are going to be? We have no idea. But again, take this page as nothing more than an illustration as a point in time, that if you want to start to put money in place, millage in place, for future debt that you need to get in place, unless you're going to totally wait until 2026 to do anything, which I don't think is the case. Okay? Or wait till 2029 and all your debt's gone. I don't think that's the case. You need to go to the green column. And you need to start putting in place equivalent mills. And I say equivalent for the following reason. The 0.22 could be new mills under the index. Okay? Because obviously you have to live within the index, and your, exceptions you have no index. So you would have to go up 5 straight years, or roughly, 0.2 of a mil, 1/4 of a mil, somewhere in that vicinity, to raise enough money to have you finance $50 million of debt. Now, equivalent means you may find the money in your budget somewhere. Very hard to do. I doubt you can do it. To find any meaningful dollars. You may find 100,000 here, or 50,000 here, or you may save money on insurances or things of that nature, and then turn that money over to the debt service side versus insurance side or something. But realistically, 1.13 mils on these rate assumptions. So let's just say rates go higher by 1%. Now you're probably looking at 1.5 mils. Okay? But if you don't start to fund it now, you will just go further behind the 8 ball as you go down the road. Okay? So if you think you're going to be doing something meaningful to the tune of 50 million, whether it's 10 million in 17, 10 million in 19, 10 million in 21, eventually getting to that point, you need to come up with somewhere in that 1.5 mil, depending where rates are, in order to accurately fund it. Now, we do not anticipate, it's aggressive from the rate side, conservative from the value of 1 mil. We leave it constant at 1.6 million. Okay? We think more than likely it's going to grow. Obviously, you would think it would grow over time, right? But we leave it constant at 1.6. So the amazing thing about this is several things. One, if you buy into the program that we do have capital projects coming up, and we do have to fund them and start to fund them now, you look at this and say, you know what, we can fund $50 million over the next three years here, and we're still out of debt in 31. That's amazing. It really is. Okay? Because your current debt is so short. Because I guarantee you, if you fund $50 million, probably 7 years from now or whatever, guess what? You're going to need more. But the brevity of your debt gives you a lot of options if you start to plan accordingly. The key is planning. The worst thing you could do is do nothing from getting mills in place over the next 2-3 years. And then all of a sudden, 3 years from now, Mike calls and says, hey Ken, we need $50 million tomorrow. Guess what? It's going to be virtually impossible for you to do that. Because you won't be able to fit it within your index. And you don't want to cut programs, you don't want to cut, whatever you're going to be cutting. So this is a sort of an illustration as you begin the very important process, okay, of getting ready to do the next wave of projects. And now for the most recent project, we were able to get away with nothing. Because your debt was falling off, we had the money in place, we borrowed $10 million, remember in 16 we did $10 million, or at the end of 15 I guess it was. And we did it for basically no mills. So you have a one-time chance to do that. And now going forward, to the extent you are going to put money in place for projects, you must start to put money in place. So when the administration comes to you as you start to put your budgets together, okay, and you want to go up 0 mills, I don't want you to go up 0 mills. Their first question needs to be, okay, are we going to do projects? Because you just heard Ken say you need 2/10 of a quarter of a mil next year. So if we're going up 0, that means we're cutting somewhere and coming up with a quarter of a mil of real dollars, ongoing dollars. So when they come to you and say, we need 2/10, a quarter of a mil to do these things over the next couple years, your answer needs to be yes, we're going to give it to you because you're committed to the projects. All right? So you can shoot anything that you want at me, okay? It's easy for me to deliver this message. I'm not sitting on the board and taking votes. But under Act 1, this is how you need to plan. You need to be good planners. And the only way to do that is to basically have a snapshot of what you need to get to. And this is a very good snapshot for you. Questions?
Any questions from the board for Ken?
When we're borrowing at a fixed rate, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, these are all assumptions based on a fixed rate.
Yeah.
My biggest concern is how aggressive 2 and 3 is.
My question is, will it actually be a fixed rate? Once the rate's set,
It's fixed.
It's never variable.
Right. No. The only way that we ever go into a situation like that, if we had a longer issue, I would entertain a bank proposal, maybe 7 years fixed, and then the last couple of years variable, as long as my break even was still better than the fixed. Because you have to set a max rate on the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And if you took 7-year rate and then a max rate and it was still better than I could do fixed today, I would do something like that. But no, the debt you have now is all fixed. All the debt you have now is fixed.
Any other questions?
As always, thank you very much, and we will have the documents. Mr. Boyne will work with Kevin to come and get the documents in 2 weeks. And with respect to this, we're happy at any time, as you know, to come back and keep on working here on that. Thank you. Have a nice night.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Is there anyone from the, I guess I can ask anyway, right? Anyone from the public would like to be heard on non-agenda items, or I'm sorry, I moved to the end of the meeting on finance agenda items only. Seeing none. Chair's summary, they're going to bring the paperwork back to look at the next meeting in 2 weeks. We're going to go back up top to number 2, academics. Ms. Price.
Okay. So, we have K-12 update and Mr. Neely. Oh, no, she's not.
We have the K-12 update. What I will tell you is you received the summary of that, which also includes some information from Ms. Trinkle's department as well. And I want to just remind you that Ms. DeVitro is out ill on medical, so that's why you see K-5. The principals also provide you with their reports from the middle level and high school level. But should there be something exceptional, I would include that in this report as well. Are there any questions on the summary that you received?
I have a question about the current education series. Have you had
Mrs. Amelia is going to elaborate on that.
I'll actually present that separately.
Okay, so any questions from the board?
And what you read?
No? Any questions? Okay. Now, Mr. Neely, and now, please go on.
Sure. Thank you. I wanted to separate this from the K-12 update because it is a new opportunity that we're providing here in Easton, the Parent Education Series. We've put together a series of workshops that will be held. Our first session will be held on October 19th at 6 o'clock at Easton Area High School. And we have a series of workshops that cover a variety of different academic and social topics that are relevant to our parents that we work with. So we have the flyer was provided to you. It's posted online. It went home with every child in our district. We also did a press release for it. The topics were selected for this specific workshop based on just conversations with parents, with the PTA, things that we think would be important for us to share with parents. We'll be running concurrent workshops during session 1 from 6 to 6:30, and then we will repeat all of those sessions again from 6:35 to 7:05. We're then going to end the evening with one large session on heroin and opioid prevention education. So that one will not run along with any other of the workshops. But our goal is to have families come out in one evening because we know everyone's busy, but really be able to share a lot of different information at that time. So I just wanted to share this with the board this evening.
Thank you. Any questions about the parent education series from the board? Any questions? Okay, Dina. So next, district assessment overview.
Good evening. This is my first big show as a director of assessment. So just take it easy on me. But what I'm going to do tonight, folks, is first give you a background on the current state of our SPP scores and assessment scores in the district. Our schools, elementary and middle, right now, our data has been corrected to the state of Pennsylvania. So roughly 6 weeks ago, I noticed that there was incorrect reporting in the number of students in various grade levels, ranging from grade 3 to grade 8. We were able to diagnose that issue in correspondence with the state, and we were able to correct that. So when the scores were published last Thursday or so, or a week ago, those scores had NA for Eastern Area School District. And so what that means is our data right now has been suppressed until it can be corrected. Our data for the high school was sent out. That information also came to you as board members, but tonight I'm going to show you first what our SPP score is going to be for the high school, talk to you a little bit about what that score means, how it's derived, and then next month I will be able to come back to you and talk to you about the individual SPP scores for our elementary and middle school once that data has been released. I will also send Mr. Reinhardt, who will then forward along to you as well, the information on the SPP data as soon as I receive it, so you have it prior to the press seeing it. Right now, that data has not been released to the public. When it does, the high school score will be shown, which I'll be reviewing with you tonight anyway. but the SPP scores for the elementary schools are going to be held until they're able to correct that data. Okay? I also want to assure you that we know, meaning your building principals throughout the district are well aware of their assessment scores. However, they have not been confirmed by the state. So they are in the process of still planning their school improvement plans, using data to inform their instruction, as well as placing students in interventions. So we're not on hold with that part of the process. We're just on hold of putting out that data in a public setting until it's accurate. Okay? So if there's any questions related to that overview, I know it was sent to you via email, but I want to make sure that we're clear on exactly why we don't have that data right now. Okay. So what's in front of you is a PowerPoint presentation along with some accompanying documents, and those documents basically highlight how schools are graded, if you will, by the state of Pennsylvania. And so what I'm going to do is to utilize this PowerPoint presentation to briefly show you an outline of how our scores are rated. So what I'd like you to do is to take a look at the 2015-2016 data, and then each of the categories that fall below there describe one of these slides that's in the presentation. So if you look at that SPP document, the first thing that we'll be discussing is the indicators of academic achievement. So before we get started on that, I want to make sure that we're all aware of what this school performance profile is and what it's designed to do. It's designed to provide a building level academic score for each of your schools. It's not to measure the entire district. It's building by building. It's also to inform the public of the performance of each of the schools as they compare to the rest of the state. The criteria is all the same. It's also to provide parents and taxpayers with performance measures across the state, so there can be a comparison amongst those. What's also important is that this building level score is tied directly to the evaluation of your principals and of the teachers within the district. So it's part of Act 82, which is the law that all of this information can be found on. What it serves on this level is the ability for the Board of Education to be educated, and if you feel the need to go to the site, you can then compare our school to schools like ours or schools within the region to see how we measure up. The way that the score is based is upon multiple measures. The emphasis on multiple measures is that the old process, AYP, or annual yearly progress, was simply measured on the PSSA test. So now there are multiple measures which I will review with you this evening and highlight for you on the high school scores. So when we look at that score, that 71.8% that's listed on the 15-16 score, to the right you're going to see indicators of academic achievement. Those categories make up 40% of the overall evaluation or SPP score. There's closing the achievement gap. There's indicators for that gap specifically for historically underperforming students, which is also something that many of our schools have to do as well because we are Title I schools. We have indication of academic growth, and that growth model is spelled out in the PBOS system. So it measures not performance, but it measures 1 year's growth for each child taking those assessments. The other academic indicators I described on the next couple slides, but what's important to mention about those is they're including graduation rate, your attendance rates of your school, what course offerings for post-secondary ed you are offering, and what the performance of those assessments are for your students within your schools. The first indicator of academic achievement, as you can see from that list, lists the PSSA scores, or in this case for the high school, it's the Keystone Algebra 1, the Keystone Literature, and the Keystone Biology Assessment. The industry standards and base competency assessments are for the NOCTI assessments that are given to students in career and technical education programs. Those students are both at Eastern Area High School with one of our 6 programs of study or at the Career Institute of Technology. all of those scores get tied back to Eastern Area High School. If you are looking at the elementary schools, which we will do in the near future, grade 3 is specifically pulled out and measured twice, so to speak, in terms of this indicator of academic achievement, because grade 3 is such an important year for whether students reach that milestone for reading on grade level. And the last is SAT and ACT college ready benchmarks. There's an indicator there that students score over 1550, which will have to be adjusted now with the new SAT. But the percentage of students that are reaching that score are indicated in this academic achievement area. And you can see that on your high school review under the location of indicators of academic achievement. Each of those areas is highlighted there. Closing the achievement gap, if you look at it, it's all students. And then the next segment is historically underperforming. They're disaggregated. Basically what it states is in the original year for the high school, the elementary schools will be different. But back in 2013, when we received the initial assessments, those scores are banked, so to speak, and that's your starting point. And then each year after that, your goal is to make up the difference between that group of students, which is your overall participation, and 100%. And so each year, they tell you it's projected you're to make up 6% or 7% or 8%, depending on that gap. And if you meet that, then you receive the check mark, so to speak, or you receive the points that are associated with that. So if you look last year at Eastern Area High School, mathematics and algebra, percent required to meet that closure gap, 100%. So the gap that was supposed to be met might have been 6 or 8%, and we met that, therefore we received 100% for that category. The ELA percentage required to meet the closure gap was not met for English Language Arts, so that was a 38.35, and what that is the exact percentage that they made in the difference. So last year they were supposed to make up 8%. If they made up 3.6, you get that percentage. They made up 35.82% of the gap that they were supposed to close. Okay? And as the site goes live, you'll be able to click on these exact scores and look at the calculations if you're really interested in how they arrive at this figure. And then in biology, once again, did very well in terms of closing the achievement gap. I'll show you a later slide on our growth over the past 4 years. But that was another 100%. When we look down to the achievement gap, the same thing happens for our historically underperforming students, only they're separated out. But when you're talking about the high school in general, you're looking at over 300 of the students of the 648 tested qualify. So we're up around 48% of our students free and reduced lunch alone. That includes those students who have IEPs, and students who are English language learners. So those are your 3 categories of historically underperforming. You can see those categories there. The high school is at 80% in terms of that gap. So they closed the gap by 80% of what was predicted for this school year. ELA, 35.48%, and 100% in the area of biology. Okay, so now we've talked about closing the achievement gap in both of those areas. The next indicator is growth. So what I've reviewed thus far is based upon achievement, and that means the number of students that were advanced or proficient. This next category bases that growth on where the student was last year and where they ended up at the end of the testing cycle. So if student A is a scaled score or in the percentile in the state of the lowest third, then the next year there's a projection of where they should be, a year's worth of growth. That year's worth of growth is measured on all students who are in that category. So it's not a measurement on achievement. It's not whether you're proficient or advanced. It's whether or not you grow in relationship to the rest of the students in the state in that specific category. So if our students are getting quality instruction, if our students have our curriculum aligned to that assessment, if they're getting interventions and the things that they need, then we should see a year's worth of growth. That year's worth of growth may not amount to a proficiency. It may not amount to an advanced score. But what you're getting credit for and what we're recognizing is that those students are growing. And so this is a different lens, if you will, on whether or not we're doing the right thing in our schools. And so indicators of growth are really important to look at. I'll also say, as part of the SPP score, it's 40%. So it carries a similar weight to those academic achievement standards that I reviewed with you before. Go ahead, Mr. Stein, any other questions?
So just to be clear, it's based on how all the other kids in that category do in the state, not based on some metric set by the state.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay? So it based all those students this year, they rank them into categories, for example. At the high school level, it's a little more complicated because it goes on projections. So if you leave 8th grade and you score science proficient, let's say you have a 1025, you're going to take the keystone in biology, it's measuring that projected growth. And we know those reports. We know that Mr. Monahan should be at a 1425. And if he reaches a 1425 or slightly below, and there's a variation, there's a deviation there, he gets close enough to that, he may be green. If he goes above that, he's going to be light blue. If he goes above that, he's going to be dark blue. So when teachers look at this growth, and schools look at the growth, and districts look at this growth, we're looking for things that are green, light blue, and dark blue. We don't want to see things that are yellow and red, which means that there is significant evidence that we are not growing, and there's within our student populations. So each of these areas is then pulled out, as you can see with the high school example that I've given you, 100% growth for mathematics, 50% growth for ELA literature, and 86% in the area of science and biology. Okay? And what's important to note is those students that are used for achievement data in the high school is 11th grade. So the students could have taken the test once, could have taken it twice, in some cases could have taken the test 3 times. The growth measurement comes from any student tested this school year. So it could be a retester, it could be the kid enrolled in a course in Algebra 1 biology or 10th grade literature, but it's any student that tested this year on the Keystone will be counted for your growth. Any questions on the growth? And the other indicators that are listed there in terms of the cohort graduation rate, as you can see, the high school graduation rate, 89.29. I gave you last year's SPP score. You can compare it. It's up again. We're not at 90% or better where we really want to be, but we're pretty close. The promotion rate is also listed there. High school doesn't have a promotion rate, but that's important in your elementary and your middle schools as an indicator of school success. The attendance rate at the high school is 96.9%. It's down about 1.5%, and that comes from our average daily attendance that's submitted through PIMS on a daily basis. The students receiving or having the ability to take, and that's what this indicator is the ability to take coursework that is an advanced placement and or college credit, or IB. And what we offer at the high school, we offer enough AP courses that we have 100% rating in that particular area. There's very few AP offerings that we don't have at the high school in terms of those opportunities. PSAT and planned participation is another indicator, and that's the number of students in your current 12th grade class that took the SAT or took the ACT or the PSAT plan. And so that number then is given a percentage on a scaled score. So we might have 326 kids that were seniors last year that took the PSAT when they were in 10th or 11th grade. And so you're measured on that because schools that are successful, that number is very high. And so I can tell you that next year's data will be much higher because we've started to implement at the high school that all students in grade 10 take the PSAT free of charge. So we've eliminated that as part of our equity plan as well, that students who need that indicator to see what they need to do in grade 11 and 12 to prepare for the SAT in college, we've taken that out of the equation for families. And we issue the PSAT 10 to all sophomores at the high school. We started it last year, and we're going to continue that. We use Title I dollars to fund that necessary resource for our kids and families. And so that number will eventually be 100% in the very near future. When you look down at extra credit, it's basically advanced on the Keystone Algebra literature in biology, the number of students advanced on your NOCTI assessments, and then the number of students who score a 3 or better on at least one advanced placement examination. And that percentage is slightly down, but those indicators then can add up to an extra 7 bonus points, if you will. So technically a school who gets a perfect could receive a score of 100 or better. Right now we're at 71.8. What's really important to look at is the global perspective, and that is what has the high school done in the last 4 years. And what you can see is in the areas of algebra, since the very first 2013 SPP data came out, the high school is at 47% proficient in algebra. Now we are at 63%. So there's not a lot of growth from last year to this year. Keeping in mind a lot of growth, not to confuse with PVOS growth, because there was a lot of that. So although the number of students proficient in advanced didn't necessarily increase for the percentage, our PVOS shows us that a lot of our kids are growing. And that means the first-time test takers in 9th grade, when they come out of the middle school, that are getting a full year of Algebra 1, may not be hitting that proficiency mark, but they're growing from where they were in PSSA 8. And then the Algebra 2 for those groups of students should grow them a little bit further. And eventually, the success that we're seeing in growth should come around for achievement as well. Biology started back at 34%. We're up to 61% this year. It's a 27% increase over those 4 tested years. Literature at 66, very stagnant over 13-14. Finally, we saw an increase this past school year to 69%, very close to 70, and that's a 3% overall. At the bottom was the SPP score in 2012-13, 13-14, 64.9, 14-15, 65.8, and this year, 71.8. What's very difficult to explain to the public is that a 71 is good, very good, because we all went to school and got marks, and C's were C's. And a lot of us have expressed to the state that when you create a system based upon a number, that most of us will go back to past practice. But a 70% gives you a nice green box, which means good. And then you get a nice little light blue box, which means better, and you get a stronger blue box when you're doing very superior. And so we are moving in the right direction. We certainly have a lot of work to do in this area, particularly in the high school. And like I said, I will give you those same results for the SPP scores for our elementary and middle school. But I think this really gives you an overview of where we stand. The SPP has not been released yet, so you're getting as a board firsthand, which you should. And then eventually, when the state figures out when they're going to do this, could be tonight, could be tomorrow, could be next week, or the week after. Because at this point, excuse the sarcasm, we really don't know when that's going to be unveiled. It was due to be out this week, and so we have the opportunity at this meeting to present this information to you in advance so that you're aware of what's going on. So ultimately, this is what we're using to measure schools. And so just on that last slide there, I put down, what is the impact on our district? It's a comprehensive evaluation. We need this data to measure our success, but also to plan for our improvement. It's important to take a critical look at how many kids do we have taking the PSAT? How many kids do we have scoring 3 or better? And looking at those other indicators. And what does our graduation rate look like? And what are we doing when we disaggregate the data for our kids? But what's also important there, and I probably should have made it the same size, if I mentioned it's equally important, is to make sure that we're looking at other sources of data as well. So not just what's in the SPP score, but what's in other data, what's in on the perceptual data, and even process data within our district. How are we implementing this strategy? How are we moving students ahead? What does our community feel about this information? And how do we move ourselves forward? Because one of the things that's really missing is all of the work that we do in the pupil services arena to help kids achieve. So what are we doing for mental health? What are we doing to make sure students have eye examinations? What are we doing to make sure students have proper health care and dental taken care of so that they can learn. A lot of that isn't measured in this. So we got to do a better job, or do a job, of making sure the public knows, and I think we do that as a district. But it's important to make sure that we mention that as well. It's not just the SPP score that should be a measurement of the school, but what other things that it's doing. And I'll throw in at the high school level and middle as well, is when we look at what extracurricular activities we're offering, what does the music program look like, what are interscholastic athletics look like, and those other things that aren't necessarily measured in this score. Questions?
I just would like to make a couple comments. First of all, this is an excellent presentation. I congratulate you, and I think that it's pretty obvious to see why Mr. Cook was assigned this responsibility in the school district, because it's a big undertaking to wrap yourself around the data that we're supposed to collect and make calls and help us make give directions about our instruction. And it's clear that he really has a grasp on all of this. Now, the other thing I want to mention, as principal of the high school in the past, over the past number, how many years were you there?
6.
6 years.
9 years altogether, 6
Okay.
as a head coach.
I think it's important for me to say congratulations on the trend that you see here on these SPP scores. It was under your leadership, and certainly under the leadership of the folks at the high school. I hope that the board gets some sense of satisfaction out of this. Those numbers aren't where we want them yet, but the fact remains that we've made some significant progress in getting them where we want them to be. So I want to say that to you as the high school principal, and I need to make sure that's carried on, to everybody else at the high school, because that's fantastic.
And it's really the achievement of all of
Yes,
everyone involved.
collectively, absolutely. The other thing I think the board should look at, and one thing I wanted to ask you, 97, just shy, 97% attendance rate. Is that, and I'm asking the question, does anyone know whether or not that is an exceptionally high attendance rate for a high school like ours? I would believe it is, but I've not looked at that data recently. But my gut on that is that given our high school population, that's an exceptionally high attendance rate, which sends in and of itself, should send some messages to all of us about the high school as a learning community, that we have kids that keep coming back day after day for the most part. And that is in and of itself a sign of a tremendously successful atmosphere and program and learning environment there. So I think that's very important to note. And the other thing is that we have Mr. Cook available any time that any of you or anyone else who would talk to you about scores would like to have some time from him. So
I can't hesitate to weigh in. He said anytime.
Anytime. So, but thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Public to be heard on academic agenda items? Anybody? Seeing none? Okay, well, there was a K-Summary Chair. There was a K-12 update, discussion about the Parent Education Series, and a wonderful presentation about the data that Mr. Cook just gave us. So, that's it.
Okay. I will apologize for Mr. Pinbone had to go. There's just a bit of a need for him to check with his son whose car stopped working at a very inappropriate, difficult spot. So he had to go get him, make sure he was okay, and he's coming back. shall we go on to the next presentation here? Or is there any comments from? Oh, I think we did ask that. Didn't you?
Okay,
Mr.
Buildings and
Simonet.
Grounds.
Yep. Mr. Simonet, would you like to talk to us about the software?
No disrespect, but hopefully we'll be done before Mr. Pinbone gets back. Just a couple of things on the buildings and grounds. We have, I'm asking the board to allow me to purchase called the Master Library. It's a software management system for facility use. We, it's 2016, and we have 12 facilities, and we are doing it all by hand with paper documents back and forth in correspondence. It does lead for a lot of problems and confusion. And I'm asking to purchase at $800 a master library. It's a software system that will coordinate and manage all of the use of facilities, where everyone can go online and see what's being used, what's in the building, who's going to be there at all times, including my office and security and maintenance.
So is it scheduling software?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. There's obviously, nowadays, there's more features to it, but it's really for the scheduling and coordinating of it.
You said it's what, 4,800?
Number two, I did briefly talk during the finance portion about the capital improvement plan. Again, we started that committee with just looking at the next building to attack. Whether it's Jessup, whether it's Palmer, and our severest needs. But as we continued on, we talked about other things. We have things outside of buildings. Rooms, as I said, the pool, the stadium. Pretty soon, and shouldn't even mention it, but there's field improvements that we're going to be hearing about. It's just that wear and tear and time over the years. We have a lot of items that through either financing or through capital reserve, items that we won't be able to do through the budget with the index, without going over index and maintaining our program. So anyway, we're really not in a position to do a presentation because we kind of changed courses, changed course last week to talk about everything, not just the buildings. So hopefully in November we'll get more of a detailed update on what we're looking at as far as capital improvements for the future.
How far out are you thinking? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
For
Capital improvement projects that you're thinking about.
to start doing? Well,
How far out does the list go?
Oh, how long will it take us? Well, as Ken indicated, we're never going to be out of debt. We could be going on. We've done well with our buildings, but with the finances, and even prior to me, there's been kind of a stalemate, going after some of the major projects that we have to do. Perfect example, the roof of the high school. We did it in stages, and now we're going around with buckets and chasing leaks. So it'll be ongoing.
So it's more of a list of the things that need to take place, but not necessarily the time frame in which they need to.
Well, it's going to be a priority.
Okay.
You're going to get time frames with that on the major items. So
Yep.
if you recall last spring or last budget time, we put out items.
Yeah.
We're going to do a budget and then future. You'll get timelines, but you'll also get things beyond any immediate timelines, things for the future, an entire list of what we can identify in that building.
Great.
In each building. Yeah, I don't anticipate March. Maybe March will be one of the ones that won't come on. Yeah. And safe to say that March and the Ed Center won't be on the
Yeah,
list.
there you go.
The next item, we have, I don't know if there's one clock that is working in the high school. It's been for a while, yeah. I have a proposal to install a new clock system at the high school to the tune of a little over $42,000. It is a state contract vendor, so we don't have to bid it. This is something that's kind of been put on the shelf for a long time. We do have money between our capital reserve and our money in our budget that we put aside for equipment needs that come up during the year. But I think it's time that we attack this and install the clocks at the high school. There's an additional charge. Let me get my glasses for this. There's 230 clocks. They're looking at $66,000 to install them. That I am not recommending. Mr. Case and his electricians will work after hours or off hours to install those clocks. I believe our guys can do it maybe about an hour at a time to install the clock and the wiring and everything. So I would just recommend going for the purchase at $42,720.
You said how much installed?
Another 66,000.
Another
I'm sorry,
or
no,
total?
I'm sorry, total goes to 66,000.
Okay.
Keep the glasses on. And the last item in the category of things that have not worked for a while and have just been moving along in repairs, the timer and scoreboard at the pool. As you know, we've got the pool to the point where we can effectively compete and use the pool for our swim team. But there is a clock system and timer there, a scoreboard and timer that is antiquated, and the scoreboard completely stopped working. It's going to get to a point where we're not going to be able to hold events there without fixing the scoreboard. To get a new scoreboard is about $5,000. At this point, the timing system is also on its last leg, and the timing system separately would be another, I think, if I'm not mistaken, $7,000. If we do them both at the same time, it'll just be another $4,000. So for $9,000, we can replace the scoreboard and the timer at the pool at the high school. And we're recommending that we do that. And we're all under CoStar's and state contract pricing, so we won't see bids or anything. Any questions?
Any questions? Any public to be heard on any of the items we just discussed? Okay. All right, do we want to proceed on, I guess we're at the end of our agenda here. Any other business coming before the board? Any other public comment? If not, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Moved. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, say